Welcome to Block 10 of our Block of the Month 2022. This month we are making 3 10-inch finished blocks. You will need 4 fabrics, a background, a medium, an accent, and a dark. A downloadable version of this pattern is available in the Files section of our Facebook group called The Quilted Forest Friends, or you can screenshot it and print it at home, or push pause and take notes. We will show it again at the end of the video, but for now, it's time to cut. From the background fabric, you need to cut 2 strips, one that is 3 3/4 inch by the width of fabric, and one that is 2 1/4 inches by the width of fabric. From the strip that measures 3 3/4 by the width of fabric, you need to cut 3 squares that are 3 3/4 by 3 3/4. I cut 2 and then I opened it up and cut 1 more. I stacked them one on top of the other so that when I bisect the squares twice, corner to corner, I would end up with 12 triangles. I used the 45-degree angle line on the ruler to help me line it up on the edge of the square so that I get a perfect cut. From the remainder of the strip that was 3 3/4 inch wide, you need to cut 6 squares that are 3 1/2 inches by 3 1/2 inches. Each of these squares will be bisected once, corner to corner, for a total of 12 triangles. From the strip that is 2 1/4 inches wide by the width of fabric, you need to cut 12 squares, 2 1/4 inches by 2 1/4 inches. You will bisect each of these squares once, corner to corner, to get a total of 24 triangles. I folded my strip in half, so I'm cutting through 4 layers of fabric. Don't let all these triangles scare you off from this block. I'll guide you through it, I'll make it easy for you, and you can do it. From the medium, accent, and dark fabrics, you will be cutting the same from each of those 3 fabrics. From each of the fabrics, you need to cut 1 strip that is 2 1/4 inches by the width of fabric. You'll cut that strip on the fold so that you have 2 strips that are 2 1/4 inches by about 18 to 20 inches. You'll also need to cut 1 strip that is 4 inches by the width of fabric. All of the remaining pieces will be able to be cut from this 1 strip. Start by cutting 1 square that is 4 inches by 4 inches. Next, you'll need to cut a square that is 3 3/4 inches by 3 3/4 inches. This square we are going to bisect twice, corner to corner, to get 4 triangles. And then I cut the strip down to about 9 inches. And then from that piece, I'm going to cut a strip that is 2 1/8 inches wide. From that strip, I will cut 4 squares that are 2 1/8 by 2 1/8. Bisect each of those squares once, corner to corner, for 8 triangles. I started with 2 rectangles that were 4 1/4 inches by 2 1/8 inches, and then cut those rectangles in half to get my 2 1/8 by 2 1/8. That way I could stack them and make fewer cuts. So you'll also need to make the same cuts from the other 2 fabrics that you have. I also have a red and a blue, so I'm going to get those fabrics cut. Now I have all the cuts made from my medium, accent, and dark fabrics. It's time to sew. Make sure you sew with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Mix and match the 2 1/4 inch strips to make 3 strip sets. Once you're done sewing, you're going to want to press these to the darker fabric, whichever one that is. It doesn't really matter which way they're pressed. You just need to press them. You could even press these seams open. Once pressed, these strip sets should be 4 inches wide. You're going to want to subcut these into squares that are 4 inches by 4 inches. I will usually stack mine and cut all the layers at once. That way I don't have to cut each of these individually and the cutting goes a little bit faster. I will use my big ruler and I will start at the 12-inch mark and then cut on the 8-inch mark and then the 4-inch mark. It's important to double check the numbers as you're cutting to make sure you're on the right measurement. Once you're done cutting, organize them into piles of like squares. The background triangles come in 3 sizes. Set aside the largest and the smallest. We'll be using the medium for the next step. We are making 12 flying geese units using the medium-sized background triangles and the smallest triangles cut from the medium, accent, and dark fabrics. With right sides together, place the small triangles on one side of the background triangle. The edges should align on 2 sides, and there should be a small triangle overhanging on this edge. As you send these through the sewing machine, be careful not to stretch them or pull on them. Just let them feed through with the feed dogs. Once you're done sewing, cut them apart and then it's time to press. You want to press these carefully so that you don't stretch the triangles out of shape. Press away from the background fabric. When I'm just making a block or two, I like to use my little pressing mat and my small iron right next to my sewing machine so that I don't have to get up and down and walk to the ironing board as much. With right sides together, place the small triangles on the other side of the background triangles, aligning on 2 sides with the small triangle hanging over the edge at the top. Keep the matching fabrics together so that you end up with 4 flying geese units from each fabric. Cut them apart and then it's time to press. Again, you're going to press away from the background fabric. Once we're done pressing, it'll be time to trim these units. We're going to trim them to 1 3/4 inch by 3 inches, and we'll get rid of all those little pesky triangles that hang over the side. I use one of my smallest rulers to help me trim these so that I don't have a lot of extra ruler to hang on to. And I will do 2 sides first, then I'll flip the whole unit around and trim it from the other side. Although it might be tempting to just simply trim off the triangles that stick out, it's definitely worth it to take the time to trim these to size. With right sides together, piece the matching larger triangle to the tops of the flying geese unit. I centered the triangles and then sewed it from the back side of the flying geese unit. This way I could see where the seam was going and adjust it as necessary to keep the point at the top visible and so that I wouldn't cut it off as I was sewing. If you're enjoying our video, we invite you to hit the like button and subscribe so that you don't miss out on any of the fun videos from the Quilted Forest. Press towards the triangle that you just added. Be careful not to stretch these out of shape. Now it's time to piece the small background triangles onto opposite sides of this unit. These raw edges should align and this small triangle should hang off the one edge. Before we press, we'll add the other background triangle to the other side. As I was testing the block for this month, I forgot to take pictures of my red, white, and blue and bright fabrics on a black background versions as I was working on them. But I did get them done and I'll show them to you at the end of the video. We are going to press these towards the background triangles that you just added. Trim as necessary to square up the corner. Use a square ruler lined up with the 2 edges of the dark triangle and trim off any excess fabric. This is a necessary step to help make the next seams lay flat. Match up the triangle units with the correct 4-inch units that we made earlier. Piece the triangle units onto opposite sides of 2 of the square units. Set the other 2 square units aside. I used a visual clue here to help me make sure I was sewing these correctly. My triangle unit had to point to a different colored fabric. Then I knew I was sewing it right. There will be another bonus Block the Month video out later this month. This will be to put another section together and to do more work on the optional borders for the quilt. So be on the lookout for that, and we will, of course, add it to the Block of the Month playlist. I can hardly believe that we're already on Block 10 of the Block of the Month for 2022. I'm really looking forward to seeing the completed quilts. Which one of the blocks has been your favorite so far? Leave your answer in the comments below. I think this one's been my favorite. I'd like to make a whole quilt using this block. In order to get the center units correct, I used the units I just made to help me set up the center units. I'd find the right pieces, put them together, and that way you have all 3 fabrics in each of the 3 blocks. Keep the seam ripper in the drawer and match them up before you sew them. Piece the squares cut from the strip sets onto opposite sides of the center squares. The directions in this video may vary slightly from the written pattern for this block. As I was testing the block, I found it easier to add the corner triangles at the end. So just in case you were wondering, it is a little different than the pattern. Press all these units towards the squares that are cut from the strip sets. Piece the triangle units onto opposite sides of the center unit. If you've pressed correctly, these seams should nest together. Press the seams towards the center row. I pressed these seams from the back side first and then flipped it over to the front to make sure I hadn't pressed in any creases. All that's left is to add the background triangles to each of the corners of the block. I just kept sending them through the machine until I had all 4 corners on all 3 blocks. Trim the extra fabric beyond the 1/4 inch seam allowance. You can use your favorite pair of scissors or your rotary cutter. Press the corner units towards the triangle. Trim the 3 blocks as necessary to measure 10.5 by 10.5 inches. I used my ruler to find the center. I trimmed the 2 sides, then I flipped the block around to trim the other 2 sides. And now, hopefully, if you've done everything right, you have 3 blocks that use all 3 fabrics in different spots. As promised, here are my blocks made with bright fabrics on a black background and my blocks for my red, white, and blue version. We hope that you will hit that like button, leave a comment for us, share the video with a quilting friend, and subscribe so that you can see all the fun videos from the Quilted Forest. Thanks for watching and happy quilting!